Guys, I might have a hot take here that might not be scorching hot once you look at the numbers, but look, when you look at the roster, it seems to be a bit of a hot take, but the Houston Rockets are not that good in the clutch despite having Kevin Durant. Look, I know it's weird because Kevin Durant is seen as one of the greatest scorers of all time. Kevin Durant's one of the biggest big-time performers we've ever seen. I mean, everybody thinks back to the shots he hit in the 2017 finals against Cleveland. We think about the numerous moments that Kevin Durant's hit these crazy shots that put his team up in the clutch and so on, but this Houston Rockets team has been faltering in clutch moments. In particular, I want to analyze the most recent loss they had to the Minnesota Timberwolves, because that game was essentially a game where the Timberwolves were without Anthony Edwards, right? So they were without their go-to playmaker and scorer, and yet the Houston Rockets found a way to win. Mind you, they were up 13 points in overtime with just under 3 minutes left to go in that overtime and still found a way to lose that game. And so I want to dive deeper into the numbers and look into the tape of how the Rockets are losing these games and what is their issue in the clutch, because as of the moment I'm recording this, which is March 26, 2026, the Rockets are 19-22 in the clutch, all right? And they have the 20th best winning percentage in the clutch despite scoring the 4th most points in the clutch. So there's issues there all around the board. For one, an Ime Udoka team that is struggling to stop opponents in the clutch, because if you're scoring the 4th most points, then scoring is not an issue for you, which is right up Kevin Durant's alley, right? And when you look at the player impact estimate stat, which evaluates a player's impact while they're on the court and so on, Kevin Durant is the guy that's having the most impact in the clutch for the Houston Rockets. But when you're looking at that, and despite Kevin Durant being a presence on the floor for them, the fact they still had the 20th best winning percentage is alarming, right? And then when you think about the fact they're giving up the 2nd highest effective field goal percentage in the clutch, this is bearing out that the Houston Rockets as a defense are just a turnstile, especially in clutch moments, and that it seems like there's multiple defensive breakdowns that happen. I mean, even in that Minnesota game, you see there's a moment there where Kevin Durant and Alperen Sengun go to the same guy, and they look at each other like, what's going on that defensive breakdown? And there's multiple times where they might give up an offensive rebound in the clutch, and it's no surprise that they had the 4th highest opponent offensive rebound rate in those moments. And when you're looking at that, those are extra possessions that you're struggling to close out as a defense. And when you're giving up offensive rebounds to a guy like Kyle Anderson or so on, and you're not getting a body on these guys, and they're able to really create extra opportunities for their teams, those are moments in a clutch tight game that can swing momentum or takes away in a possession from your team being able to possibly go down, extend your lead, or even come back and cut into a lead. I think that the Rockets, and it's very surprising from an Ime Udoka team, because when you look at the Rockets from the season beforehand, when they were one of the top seeds in the West, and granted, it's not like the Rockets are this awful team. I think more so I just want to analyze their clutch performances, because in the clutch, I mean, even beyond this Timberwolves game, they struggled against the Lakers in the clutch when Luka went crazy, and there was moments there that you saw their offense and their defense really start to falter. Granted, Luka Doncic was hitting incredible shots, but you still saw some of the cracks that this team has in the clutch moments and how they struggle to operate in those moments in a lot of different ways. And I think, honestly, it also comes down to a ball security issue for this team. And I think a lot of it extends to the fact that they don't have a legit point guard. Before the season started, when Fred VanVleet went down, it was very clear that there was going to be a gaping hole in terms of a playmaker or a facilitator. And obviously, when you have the ball in the ball handler's hand that's used to being pressured and used to having to make passes in tight spaces, the turnovers aren't going to be as frequent. But then when you look at a guy like Kevin Durant or even Alperen Sengun, because those guys have the highest usage rates within the clutch moments for the Houston Rockets, their turnover ratios, I mean, for Kevin Durant, he's 1-to-1 on turnover ratio. And for those who don't know what turnover ratio is, essentially if you have, for example, a 2-to-1 turnover ratio, that means for every 2 assists you got 1 turnover. So if you finish the game with 10 assists, you had 5 turnovers or something of that sort, right? But if you're 1-to-1, that means for every assist, that means you also have a turnover, which is awful. And most really good playmakers, you want, I mean, Chris Paul, I think, has one of the most absurd assist to turnover rates in league history. And so when you're talking about a 1-to-1 turnover ratio, that means you're just not protecting the ball. And there's numerous circumstances in that 4th quarter and in that overtime. Kevin Durant had 4 total turnovers between the 4th quarter of that game and overtime. And when you're looking at Alperen Sengun, who's the guy that also handles the ball the second most with the 2nd highest usage rate in those moments, he has a 0.94 assist to turnover ratio. My man is turning the ball over more in clutch moments than he is even getting assists. So that's an indictment on their ability to protect the ball as a whole and as a team. And Kevin Durant is averaging the 7th most turnovers in clutch moments, with Alperen Sengun being a close 10th, which is awful, right? These guys are not being able to secure the ball, which hurts them, I believe, in the regards that they have the ball in their hands in a lot of these moments. But I think if they had a legit point guard, and especially a guy of the quality of Fred VanVleet, he could get these guys possessions and looks where they're not having to be the guys that bring the ball up the court, not having to create all the action. Kevin Durant, a lot of times, obviously he can play on ball and so on, right? But a lot of Kevin Durant's success throughout his career, especially when you look at the template that was orchestrated for him in Golden State, came off of him coming off ball screens, getting pin downs, getting those easy mid-range jumpers and so on, catch and shooting type of situations. But when you're especially him to have to facilitate and all that as well, it's a lot, especially at that frame and that height where you got guys' hands reaching all over the place and you got to fit passes into a really tight spot and you're damn near 7 foot, then it's a lot of margin for error essentially for Kevin Durant in those spaces. And so when you had a guy like Fred VanVleet, or if you had a legit point guard in that regard, then it would be so much easier. And I think the Rockets expected Amen Thompson to kind of take that leap and fill that gap, but he just hasn't shown to be that guy. That offensive capability for defensive impact in some scenarios, right? The Rockets pride themselves on being that big team that can kind of dominate teams with their size and be able to have flexibility with their athleticism and their size. But Reece Sheppard, obviously being a smaller guard, kind of dips into that. Granted, Fred VanVleet kind of falls into that same category as Reece Sheppard. Granted, I think Fred VanVleet is just a better overall player, but that's neither here nor there. And those are just some of the things that I take into account when I'm looking at these clutch moments. And I think the Rockets, when you're looking at all the turnovers they had in the fourth quarter, and then just different moments that they had where they allowed the Timberwolves to essentially go on a 15-0 run in overtime, is just absurd to me, especially when you're under 3 minutes left and you can't get a quality bucket, right? It hurt. Obviously, it hurts if Tari Eason can't hit a wide open shot or something of that sort. But when you got guys like Kevin Durant or Alperen Sengun just making mistakes or missing bunny layups or things of that sort, why I say you can't make these turnovers and stupid mistakes on offense, I think defense, when you're defensively sound, it gives you a bigger margin for error, right? And I think the Rockets, their defense has taken multiple steps back for whatever reason, and I think that does fall back on Ime Udoka and the coaching staff, that they have to address that, especially for this team in those clutch moments where you're having miscommunication, you're having defensive breakdowns, and it shows up in the biggest moments of games when you need to communicate the most, because that's normally when a lot of teams bring out some of their most unique sets so they can try and get a guaranteed bucket or something of that sort. And you see the Rockets tend to falter in a lot of those moments. And I don't know. It's an interesting analysis for me to look at and review this Rockets team. But guys, give me your thoughts down in the comments. What do you think about the Houston Rockets? Do you see them as a team that goes beyond a first round playoff appearance? I mean, what are your thoughts? And who do you think that would probably be their preferred matchup in the first round to try and make it to the second round in the Western Conference? Drop your thoughts down below in the comments, and also let me know who you think is most culpable for the Rockets' struggles in regards to their performance in the clutch. Drop your comments down below. Of course, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Follow me on all social medias, and guys, until next time, I'm out.